stories. So I'm about to blow your mind. Okay? Well, God does great things in our lives. And we have these stories or testimonies. And I believe it's important to share them, not only to spread the faith to the non-believers, but to also strengthen each other and give each other hope. And to kind of give you a background, I'm going to tell you my story. In May of 2010, I was working at the Melting Pot in Bellevue, and I was having some severe shoulder pain. And I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but I was feeling around and I found a lump on my neck. And I went into my doctor and got an x-ray, and he didn't like the looks of it. So I went in and got a PET CT scan, and I had it biopsied. And it turned out what I had was what's called Hodgkin's lymphoma. And basically what that is it's an immune disease that attacks your lymph nodes and attacks all your white blood cells and healthy cells, and basically corrupts your immune system to the point where you won't have an immune system anymore and you're going to die. Now, the first treatment option that I was given was called ABVD chemo. And the interesting thing about Hodgkin's lymphoma is it's actually 90% treatable through the first intervention of treatment. But unfortunately, after 4 months of treatment, they saw that the cancer was just as big as it was the day I found out I got it. So it didn't work. I was in that 10% as to where 90% of the people are cured the first time. I was in that 10% where it didn't work. And that was a big shock to me. I was 20 years old. I thought I had everything going for me. I had a good job, a good family, good friends. I had a good church. And it was just a shock to me. I didn't know what was going on. And I just thought to myself, God, why am I in this boat? Why me? And so me and my dad went to the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance for a meeting with one of the oncologists there. And they said that I would be doing ice chemotherapy. This chemotherapy was much more toxic than the first one, and I would have to go through 36 hours of chemo nonstop. So while I was sleeping, I had a little fanny pack with a pump on it that would just pump chemo. And I gotta say, that thing was so annoying. You don't want to sleep with something going. I mean, come on, I'm just trying to get my rest, and this pump's going on. It was ridiculous. But I got through that, and when I went into my doctor, they told me that if this chemo didn't work, then I would have a 20% chance of living. A 20% chance of living, and I was 20 years old. And it didn't work. I mean, I was just heartbroken. I couldn't tell you. It was one of those things where, I felt like God was telling me the whole time, even before all the chemo and everything, that I was going to live through this. But I wasn't sure, We have those doubts, and those doubts plague us. And that's what was happening to me. I knew God was going to heal me, but when you have a 20% chance of living, you're just like, ugh. So the next steps of treatment were 2 stem cell transplants. And it was what's called an apheresis stem cell transplant, meaning that they would take my own stem cells, save them and store them until when I need them. And here's kind of the first intervention of where I really saw God taking care of me. A stem cell transplant usually requires about 10,000 stem cells for one, and they usually only collect about 5,000 to 10,000 stem cells per cycle, and they can only do it once. Now, I would have to do 2, and when they were telling me, we want about 10,000 for each, it was just kind of like, well, I hope this goes well. And I remember I texted everybody, let them know what was going on, and I got a text back from Pastor Justin asking if it was okay if you guys all prayed for me as a church, and I said absolutely. It turned out I was able to collect 23,000 stem cells. Way more than I ever needed. Praise God, that was awesome. And it was just that little bit of good news and just this hopeless light that would keep me going. Now, the first stem cell transplant required me to do something that only 2 people before me had done. And it was when they would take a radioactive isotope and insert it through an IV, and it would kind of just float to the cancer and kill it. The thing about that was I was radioactive for 4 days, so I had to be in a lead-lined room by myself with the door open. And so it was basically, come see the amazing radioactive man. All my friends came out. It was pretty funny. And, a lot of good people came and saw me, and I was just blessed to have the friends that I do. And one of the stories at the hospital was there wasn't enough chairs, so I got up and I looked out the door and I saw everybody rolling around in wheelchairs kind of playing, and it was just kind of funny. But anyway, so I got that done. It wasn't too toxic to my body, but it definitely, wiped me out. It killed my immune system, and so I had to kind of take it easy for a while. And when I got the report back from the doctor, it was not what they expected. It hadn't done what it was supposed to do, but it had somewhat shrunk the cancer. I mean, at this point, I was just like, God, what are you doing right now? This is crazy. I have 1 more treatment left, and this doesn't work. I'm a dead man, 3 treatments had failed. I was in pretty rough waters at that point. My body was broken. I had just so many surgeries. My neck at one point, I had to get, just surgery after surgery on it because my lymph node kept swelling up and the scar wouldn't close. And I was just in pain all the time. But I held on to the belief that God was going to heal me because He spoke it into my heart. And I had that little piece of hope to hang on to. And when nobody else thinks you're going to make it, that doesn't matter. When God tells you something and He promises you something, He's going to keep it. So I went into my last treatment, and the treatment was called Bumelt. And it's called Bumelt for the reason that it literally melts your tissue. It is one of the most toxic chemotherapies that you could possibly go through. So after that, I did 7 days of chemotherapy, and I was in the hospital for 12 days on life support because my entire GI tract was swollen and had sores all over it, so I couldn't eat or anything. It was just in excruciating pain. But it was in that 12 days at that hospital that I've never had such a clear focus and calling of what God wanted me to do in life. On about the 9th day, I was laying there just in misery. I mean, I'd been in a hospital for 9 days. That's awful. I mean, the shower head was like up to here, so it was just, the food was just, I didn't eat food anyway, and so just the exponential horribleness of hospital food. Oh my gosh. Anyway. On the 9th day, I was laying in bed and I was feeling, just hopeless. And I turned to my side and I closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, I had a vision. And in that vision, I just saw these happy people. And they were all surrounded in white light. And these people were just, full of joy. They were so happy. And I was just thinking, God, I'm suffering here. When am I gonna be happy again? Am I even gonna make it? And I hadn't read my Bible in about 2 weeks, and that's something I do every single night. And I was reading through the book of Job. And for some reason, I felt compelled to open up to where I left off in the book of Job. Now you can say I was feeling pretty Job-ish at that time if you read the story. But God opened up the heavens and He was speaking to Job. And what He was saying to him was just absolute truth into his life. And some of the things I took away from that story was God was telling Job, when have you not hung out with wicked people? When have you not taken a man into your home? And it was that realization that I've been calling myself a Christ follower,
but I haven't been following Christ like I should have been. But I kept reading along, and the verse came, "You will be running in the field with your friends again." And I read that, and I was just like, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I fully trust you. And at that moment, he spoke into my heart that I was completely healed. I wouldn't know for another 45 days, but I knew he was speaking to me, and he said, "You're healed." And the peace that came with that was just unbelievable. When we're going, when we're on those rough seas, when we're in the belly of the whale, when we have to kill 1,000 people with a donkey's jawbone, it's in those moments that God's going to be there for you. He's going to give you that strength that you don't have. So I got out of the hospital. I was finally able to go home with my family and spend time with them. And I just had to recover. I dropped 25 pounds in the hospital. I was bald, I was pale. I was not this good looking, I'm going to tell you that. But about 30 days later, they wanted to scan me. And they usually wait about 60 days to scan me, or scan people. But because of the severity of the cancer, and just how quickly and malicious it was, they wanted to scan me early. And my doctor was very upfront with me. She said, "We don't know what we're going to find. We're thinking that it might still be there, but we're not sure." I went into my doctor on July 5th of 2011, and the first time in a year, I heard that I was cancer-free. And the funny part about that was he told me I was going to be running in the field with my friends again, and I had a vision of that field out there. And 4th of July, I was throwing a frisbee around in that field over there. How great was that? But in the hospital, when I was reading through the book of Job, I also read something else that was has stuck with me and is forever going to stick with me. And it was the words, "Live by the word or die by the sword." And that just means to me that you're either going to live for Christ, you're going to live for God 100%, you're going to give everything you have into it, or you're going to get caught up in sin, and like it says, you're going to die by the sword. But it's so funny, you always hear, God makes us strong in our weaknesses. And I guess my weakness at this point was having cancer. And now that I'm cancer-free, I'm using it. I'm using it by speaking at different events. I spoke at the Tacoma Celebrity Waiter Luncheon for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I just told my story, the story that I had, and it gives hope to people. And the book of Romans tells us that through suffering brings perseverance, through perseverance character, and character hope. And that has never been so true. What I went through, people have come up to me now and said, I watched your video, I heard your speech, I heard your story. My daughter's going through something like that. My friend's going through something like that, and I shared it with them. And it just gave them so much hope. I thank all my doctors because they were saving my life. But I know overall, God had a hand on each and every one of them. And, God's not always just going to miraculously heal us, Sometimes he's going to use medicine. Sometimes he's just going to wipe it out of us just through prayer. In this case, unfortunately, I had to get the medicine, but that's okay. But I'm just so thankful for the people that have been praying for me, Don and Bonnie Hilborn, always visiting me at the hospital. I love you guys, David and Sherry Brecken, when I was getting these surgeries, they were there for me, My friends were there. McNeely's praying nonstop for me, and everybody that was praying nonstop for me. I just thank you so much. It was just on the screen in James, the prayers of a righteous person. And that's what it took, I knew I had faith.